title of the streams beforehand. So I had to go in and change the title of the stream from last week's to the updated one. But we're right on time. Actually, still a minute early, which is good. But how you doing, everyone? It's Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024. Back again with another important topic tonight. This is one that I mentioned last week was going to be super important to me, and I know it's going to be super important to a lot of you out there as well. And that is dealing with social anxiety as a music maker. This is something that I experience even outside of my own creative works. Just having social anxiety in general. If I go to a restaurant, I go to the store, I go anywhere with a lot of people, I definitely have felt this really for my whole life. And I'll pull up here the official definition. This is a definition by the National Institute of Mental Health. They define social anxiety as a disorder of intense, persistent fear of being watched or judged by others. This fear can affect your work, school, and other daily activities. It can even make it hard to make and keep friends. And for me, I never really had issues with making friends. I mean, I've always had kind of the same small circle of friends for my whole life, pretty much. And these are people I met in school when I was growing up. So I never really have expanded super far outside of that. But definitely can relate to what even the definition says about just, you feel like you're always being watched. And it's kind of a hard thing to explain. And to explain to someone that doesn't have it, it's really like you kind of have to be in those shoes of that person to really understand like how they're feeling. So whenever I've had to describe it to people, that's kind of how I would describe it. Is it's like everyone's watching you, even if they're not, which is very difficult no matter where you're at in any type of public setting. And it's kept me from doing a lot of things that involve large groups of people, like concerts, like things like that, or theme parks, or anything that's like a super huge thing. Even going to a movie, which I really enjoy certain movies. I don't like all types of movies, but if there's a movie that I really want to see, even going to a movie with like a packed theater is like a personal hell for me, honestly, because I always feel like there's just too many people, it's overwhelming. And it just kind of gets to me. So it's really been something that I've dealt with for a long time. And it wasn't until around probably 2018 or 19 that I kind of, figured out what it was. Because I honestly just used to think that something was wrong with me, or like the way that I was, approaching life, or maybe I was just too much inside the box, too introverted. Maybe that was the problem. But when I started to research more about social anxiety and, other people that have dealt with it, I was like, no, this is definitely what it is, because I'm relating exactly to what people's experiences are with this. And I actually remember I saw an interview by the rapper named Wale, who I've been a big Wale fan for 15 years or so. I mean, I first heard his music in like 2009, and he had an interview probably during the pandemic talking about his experience with social anxiety, and everything he kept saying in the interview, I was like, that's me. Like, I never thought that anybody else like related to that in the way of that. And he was talking about how he would walk around pretty much everywhere just wearing like sunglasses, or just trying to keep a low profile and kind of presenting himself in a way that made him less approachable, because it wasn't because he wanted to be disliked by people or he didn't want to interact with anyone. It was because of the social anxiety. And he was like, it's just easier for me to do that, to kind of like get by on the day to day. And people take it the wrong way and think you're a bad person or you're rude or whatever. But it's like, it's really none of those things. It's just, it makes it easier for someone with that anxiety to operate. And sometimes that's what you got to do. And I definitely can relate to that for sure. And like I said, just, digging more into it. And I thought it would be something to touch on specifically for creatives, because I think the parallels between the two are interesting, because they kind of, are at war with one another. Because if you're creative, your whole thing is you have to put your art out in the world, and it's going to be received by, hopefully, a lot of people. Even if it's just a few people, that's a group of people. And if you do, live performances or any type of showcasing where you're in person, presenting your art, that could be a big issue, because if you have social anxiety, how are you going to be able to do that without like having a panic attack or something? And for me, I don't really have a lot of experience with, performing on stage. I'm not an artist with, I don't sing, I don't rap. And maybe one day, I'll do shows like performing beats and things like that, because a lot of producers do that, and I've thought about it. But a lot of, me thinking about that too is thinking about how would that work for me, because I have social anxiety. Like, would I really be able to do it? And I've always kind of thought about that, and I hope I can get there one day. Like, if I decide to do it, of course, because right now I really don't feel like I need to do it, and I don't have a fan base to do that. But one thing that I've always thought about is, like, could I even do it if I wanted to? You know what I mean? It's just interesting to think about. But I think just being able to touch on this and what it means for musicians and how important it is, because I know I'm not the only one dealing with it too. I thought it would be great to touch on. So we're going to cover a few different things, a few different articles that I found. And the first article is from Splice, who makes samples. Obviously, if you're a producer, the company Splice, sound design, samples, go check them out. And this article is called Managing Your Mental Health, Healthy Habits for Music Producers. So this one is specifically tailored for producers, but it could really apply to other music makers as well, because there's some interesting topic points in this. So it starts out saying social anxiety disorder can be debilitating. Everyday nerves can quickly turn into a genuine fear of socialization, and natural thoughts about your appearance can spiral into an overwhelming concern about embarrassing yourself. Kind of goes back to that definition of, even if you have self-confidence, I think a lot of people kind of get self-confidence mixed up with the social anxiety thing, because to me, I'm a self-confident person to be able to make art and put myself out there and talk on camera like this. To me, that's not the same as having social anxiety, because I can talk to a camera all I want. If I'm out in a group of people, it's going to be a lot harder to say what I am feeling and, do those sorts of things. So I think self-confidence and, dealing with social anxiety can still conflict with one another. So I think that gets confused a lot. And, you get worried about those things. It's really just in your head, and you're just like, man, am I really like being judged by these people right now? Even if it's not true, it still comes up. Unfortunately, global rates of generalized anxiety have skyrocketed in the past few years. Recent World Health Organization report found that COVID-19 triggered a 25% increase in anxiety and depression, as many struggled with isolation and financial fears. For me, the pandemic itself, from personal experience, I didn't really struggle with it too much, because I actually enjoyed being in the house, I'll be honest with you. I did get laid off from one of my part-time jobs at the time, so that was a bit difficult to deal with. But as far as like on the creative side of things, I actually found it as kind of a blessing to be able to have that time dedicated to creating. So I did enjoy that part of it. But for a lot of people, it was, a much different story. I definitely could see how, a sickness too. And if you knew anyone that had COVID very badly or passed away from it, it was probably a much different experience for you. Or if you dealt with it yourself, and you're trying to deal with that, and then, you got laid off or something like that on top of it. So like, how can you even balance all of that to begin with? So yeah, anxiety, depression, anxiety and depression can definitely go up from, things like that happening. And COVID was definitely the biggest one that has happened in recent years for all of us that we all can relate to. It says there's no right way to overcome social anxiety. However, you may find solace in music, Music and music therapy can be a catalyst for self-exploration, collaboration, and improvement in self-esteem. Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of what I said earlier with, it's a personal thing, you know what I mean? It's not something that I think everybody is going to relate to 100%, like each person. You know, your own experience with it is your own instance, and being able to have something creative in your life is going to be able to be a way, like it's going to be able to be an outlet for you. And that's what music has been for me. You know, obviously I've touched on in the podcast how important music is in my life in general. But when it comes to dealing with something like social anxiety, it's definitely helped me a lot to be able to have an outlet in that way, which I think is super, super awesome. And yeah, it might not be music. It might be art. It might be, I don't know, you collect trains, you collect cars, you do anything that is freeing for you. That's pretty much what that means. So music is just an example of that. Anxiety, one possible symptom of mental stress is anxiety. Anxiety is defined by feelings of uneasiness, worry, or nervousness about something that has already occurred or is yet to happen. Which, again, I feel that even outside of social settings. You know, I think we all feel pressure from time to time, whether it's something we need to get accomplished or something that, you know, is just really bugging us that we can't seem to shake. You know, it can cause a lot of stress and anxiety. To generalize, it's basically a reaction to fear of the unknown. Anxiety is distressing because the situation that is feared can be kept in focus, even though it may not actually be present in the moment. Anxiety can manifest in a number of ways, including but not limited to lack of focus, fatigue, feelings of dread, restlessness, diminished concentration, nervousness, excessive worry, muscle tension, and panic attacks. I actually know some people that deal with having panic attacks. I've never dealt with this myself. My anxiety doesn't get to that level, having a panic attack. You know, but I know that's something that people can deal with. I can imagine how terrifying that can be, even if you have experience with like panic attacks and you've had them frequently throughout life. You know, like how to deal with them to an extent. Like I imagine it's still very terrifying to deal with, go through that. And yeah, like muscle tension. I've heard of people having like muscle spasms even from the stress, breakouts. Myself, I don't really have the best skin. I break out easily. I'm not really sure how much of that is due to stress, but I can assume that some of it has to do with the stress for sure. And then like lack of sleep, things like that. Luckily, I'm not someone that gets like super. I don't lose sleep over things. Like my body tends to shut down at a certain time, which we're actually going to be touching on sleep schedules in a few weeks, about sleep schedules for music makers and like what does that look like, because I know a lot of people, their sleep schedule is nothing, they don't have one. So that's an interesting topic we'll get into soon, but I've never really dealt with losing sleep over anxiety, but obviously that could happen. It says some level of anxiety is normal. It's completely normal to feel anxious about situations in which you may be potentially uncomfortable. Uncomfortable situations are an occupational hazard of being in the creative field, whether it's networking with other artists, performing with artists you don't know, or taking on a client as a musician. You'll always have to navigate the unknown path to success. And yeah, I mean, being in any type of creative field, you're looking at the most unknown, you know, path you could ever take. And that's the thing, like think about how a person with a 9-to-5 feels, you know, about their job. Well, that's something you can kind of control, you know, as long as you show up on time and do your job and things like that, your path is relatively there, you know, unless you get laid off, which is always a possibility. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. You show up, you do your job, you repeat the cycle. With a creative field path, you know, it's very up in the air. Like you could align yourself as best as you want, and kind of like lay out your own path, but it's still going to take you in a lot of different directions, and you're not going to be able to control every single aspect of it, which that can be tough for a lot of people. It's been tough for me too. It's just like over time you find ways to deal with it better. I think you get used to the unknown a little bit more every time, but every new step is still frightening. It's about taking that leap of faith and just knowing it's all going to work out somehow. But it doesn't mean you're still not going to be stressed about it during the process. The difference between short-term and long-term anxiety. I didn't actually know a lot about this right here. It says, however, it's important to note that there's a difference between short-term and long-term or chronic anxiety. Momentary anxiety about a particular situation is common, but when it becomes a long-term condition, it can have really damaging effects on your life. Stress and anxiety can enable or coexist with our mental health conditions, such as insomnia or depression. They can also manifest in a variety of physical illnesses. So basically it's just saying, the longer it goes on, it can open up the doorway to other things like depression, suicidal thoughts, things of that nature. Again, things that I've dealt with before, things that haven't really been super prevalent, but, from time to time, those things come up. And it's just like, how do you find the way to push past that? And for me, like I said, I think it's just a reminder of you got to embrace the unknown, but you also just got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I just think the more time you do it, that just gets easier. I think at the beginning is when it's the toughest. And I've said that many times before on, podcasts, different platforms I've spoke on, is just, that's really how I've seen it to be true. That's what I know to be my experience. Other people might feel differently. But that's really just what it's been for me, is like each day, you just keep reminding yourself of how far you've come and what more you can do moving forward. How can you help someone else out there? And that's really just what you got to do. It's always going to be tough to some degree, but you just got to keep pushing through it. It says there's so much uncertainty in today's music industry that just paying your bills or finishing a track can trigger anxiety. That said, in our opinion, the goal of managing anxiety is analyzing what exactly is triggering it and understanding whether these fears are actual threats to your well-being or based on unrealistic belief that a negative outcome will occur. And that leads to, and that's pretty much the end of my readings here already. But when I read that, I think about, outlook, perspective. How important is it to have a positive outlook on what you're doing creatively, or just what you're doing in life in general, shifting your mindset. Mindset shift has been like the biggest part of my journey as a human, not even as a music maker, just as a human in general. Just being able to, be more open to what can happen that's good. And I think a lot of people get that misconstrued. They think that, if you're just always painting a positive picture, that you're not paying attention to what's real and you're kind of just shoving to the side reality. But I never looked at it like that at all. I think I looked at it as, you kind of get the energy back that you put out, which I mentioned on a stream like a few weeks ago, is like not really manifesting per se, but just if you have those positive goals in mind and you're just seeing it with somewhat of a clear vision, the chances of you landing on something positive is pretty good, even if you don't get there right away. And I used to be a super pessimistic person, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, to an extent, I still kind of am, but I think I'm more pessimistic now in the joking way of like, I'll joke with people about it, which sometimes can also not be super healthy. So I don't want to act like that's acceptable either. Sometimes it's not. Because even when you joke, there can be some truth in that, or there can be some, self-damage that's happening in what you're saying. So I even am guilty of that to an extent, but I used to be like pessimistic for real. Like I would just be super negative and just think the world was out to get me and all these things were happening because, just I had bad luck or something. You know what I mean? Instead of just like having self-accountability and understanding like, am I putting myself in this spot, or is this like something that I should be aligning myself with? And then when I started to align myself with things that were more positive and have real goals, then things started to kind of turn exactly how I wanted them to, or in the direction that I wanted them to go. So that's just something to keep in mind too. It's like we got to kind of, the world's hard enough as it is, with just everything going on. So it's like, why would we put ourselves on the path to more anxiety or more stress? And while you can't always control what's going on with how you feel in crowds and things like that, you can control how you feel about yourself and like what's going on around you. And you that's all you can do. You can control what you can control, and everything else is going to play out exactly how it's supposed to. And you just got to trust that that's going to go down like that. So, that's pretty much what comes to mind when I think about social anxiety. So I have a few links that I'm going to leave you guys. One of them is from that article that I just read, which again, it's called Managing Your Mental Health, Healthy Habits for Producers. Well, like I said, everything in there pretty much applies to music makers in general. That's not really, specific for just producers. Now let me pull up this other couple links here. The next link we have is called Overcoming Social Anxieties with Music Health from the Whisper Room, Whisper Room Incorporated. So in the article, they touch on music therapy. It says music therapy is a great way to overcome social anxiety. Music therapy is a well-established subfield of psychological therapy. It doesn't require any previous experience. You don't have to have extreme social anxiety to benefit from music therapy, as trained psychologists will adapt to your skills and interests. You can benefit from music therapy even if you don't play an instrument. Some music therapists offer services that revolve around dance or discussions about music you listen to, while others help you vocalize your thoughts through song. Music therapy can help you build community too. Some therapists offer group sessions where you can bond with folks who share a common love for similar bands or genres. Sharing your thoughts in a safe space may even give you the confidence you need to step outside your safe zone and start a band yourself. So it gives you ways to kind of help your social anxiety, specifically if you're into music. And that method sounds like it would work even if you weren't a musical person. Like if you don't make music, you could still participate in something like this. Through being just a fan of music. If you're all a fan of the same type of bands, you can start to build some type of rapport with those other people. And it's kind of like what we discussed with the therapy a few weeks ago, like musicians therapy, like you all in a group, you all have similar interests and struggles, and then you all can relate to each other in that way. So I think that's really cool. And then it talks about building a band, sharing your work, resilience, and self-efficiency, and a few other things in that article. I said I was going to be over the cough last week. I'm almost over it, I swear. But it's better than it was last week for sure. So I'll leave that one in the description of the YouTube. And then the last one that I'm going to leave is called Social Anxiety as a Musician. It's from the Mental Health Forum. And this was kind of cool. This is not a official article or anything like that, but it is a forum, like a chat forum. And there was a person on this chat forum called Cygnus, and he wrote this article in August of 2021. So I'll read this for you. This will kind of be like our closing for the day. It says August 21st, 2021. It said, I'm a musician, and part of being successful as a musician is building strong relationships with others and being a part of the community. Recently moved to a new place to attend graduate school and pursue a career in music, and I've been struggling. I have very intense social anxiety and find it very hard to meet new people, which has been made harder coming out of the pandemic. It takes me a long time to warm up to new people, and approaching someone new is absolutely terrifying to me. Oftentimes, I'll see events or shows that are happening that I tell myself I should go to, but the prospect of being around so many new people and feeling the pressure of meeting and making a good impression on the people there is overwhelming. Oftentimes, I feel like I'm just too awkward and people would rather avoid me after meeting me, or I hardly leave an impression on anyone because I'm so quiet and passive. I just feel so stuck. I know I should go out and be a part of things that are happening, but more often than not, my anxiety gets the best of me and I end up not going. I wish I could go just to enjoy the music and not have to worry about people talking to me, which I also feel bad admitting because the performers are people too, that deserve attention and recognition. I just wish I wasn't so afraid. I guess what really concerns me about all of this is that I'm not really cut out to be a musician and that I made the wrong choice in pursuing music. I really love playing and performing. It's just this other stuff that is paralyzing me. I tend to be really hard on myself for not being more outgoing or sociable, and I tell myself that I never will be successful because of it. So he posted that in 2021, and reading that back, you know, if you have social anxiety, you can relate to a lot of what he said, even if it's not the direct thing that has probably happened to you. You probably relate to bits of what he said. But I found this, and then I found like all the responses. And there was a lot of people saying, yeah, I relate to this. Like, I'm a singer. This person said I'm a singer, instrumentalist. And they're talking about, like, you know, their own experiences and, you know, really showing sympathy for this person. And then I thought it was cool because this person 2 years later, in 2023, they returned and they said, thank you so much for replying. I made this post at a very low point in my life and haven't followed it for a very long time. I really appreciate you for sharing your experience on this old post. Warms my heart to have so much support. And then went on to say a lot of other stuff that I'll let you guys read on your own. He made a couple of different posts, I think, about it. Or no, he posted the same thing twice, but definitely read the full post that he reposted 2 years later, talking about like his progress and the things that he did to help out and how he feels much better and he's continuing with music, things like that. I just thought it was super cool. It was a super random thing that I found. And it's not, like I said, it's not like an official article or anything, but it's something that I feel like people can relate to when we think about mental health, because that's a real life example of how someone could overcome their anxiety in that way and not be so down on themselves and not think they don't have a chance or not think that they're all alone. So it's important to know that you're not all alone in how you're feeling in regards to that. So that is pretty much all I had for tonight. And again, this is a very in-depth topic, kind of like the therapy topic where there's so many layers to it. You could just keep going and going, but I just wanted to keep it kind of short and sweet to an extent. And yeah, I hope you guys can take from this and learn from it. We might even do like a second part of this one day. Maybe like expand on the ideas of like how to overcome it or things like that. But this was more of like a personal one for me too, to kind of like get my own experience out in the world, like let people know how I felt dealing with it. Like I said, I don't think I've had nearly as much trouble as some people have with it, because I can still relatively remain behind the scenes a lot of the times. I'm not doing live performances yet. But if you are, and you have experience with things like what I just read, you could probably relate to it and just know that, you just got to do your best, and you're definitely not the only one dealing with it, for sure. So just keep that in mind. But we will be back next week, October 29th. We're going to be discussing music distribution. So where can you get your music out there? Pretty common topic. But I'm going to kind of do a version for 2024 headed into 2025. And what does that look like? Some of like the distributors I've used, because I've used a couple at this point. Maybe not giving like super in-depth detail, but just giving you your options and what I think I would recommend to an extent you can use. So before I lose my voice entirely, it's been a half hour, and it was a great half hour, and I hope you guys took a lot of value from this. And if you're watching the YouTube replay, like I said, go check out those 3 links. They'll be in the description of the video, and feel free to do your own digging on social anxiety for music makers. And yeah, but until next Tuesday, we'll see you guys then. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks for watching. We'll see you then.